What is up? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the NBA Hardwood Show here on Friday, March 8th. We got a 6-game NBA slate. We got the usual Friday crew back from the RPS party. I'm a little tired myself, but here back on the grind, ready to break down this NBA slate with my guys, Mangone and JT. Mangone, I assume you made it home safe and sound. How you doing on this Friday afternoon?
Yes, I know the chat's going to be riled up that I haven't changed the background. I will change it in the next couple of days or so when I think of something good. But we're at the RPS party. It was crazy busy, but happy to be back. Happy to be back in the swing of things. Hit the gym today. That was a good time. So, and P. Lally said, back to the Swift man. Go, P. Lally, you got to let it organically happen, okay? Is Taylor Swift lingering a little too long? Yes, I agree. But the party... It just, again, we've been busy. We've been running around. We had a good time. JT, you missed out on a good time at the Kentucky game. So overall, though, it was a fun time. I had a blast. You got to miss me in my shorts and sweatshirt at the steakhouse. So that was a good time as well. Had some tasty food and excited to break down this slate and really get back into the swing of things.
Absolutely. JT, how you doing on this Friday afternoon?
I'm doing well. I mean, listen, we can never have enough Taylor Swift. I think that's what we have learned throughout this NFL season. Jose Morales, he has no time for games, but we had all the time for games this week. Shout out to Colton's dad, a.k.a. Tubby, for bringing us those steaks that fed us for a couple of days. And just an absolute great time with the Run Pure Sports crew. DC, got to second that tweet you sent out. If you get a chance to join us, because there aren't many chances to join us, I would do it and do it immediately. But happy to get back into the swing of things on this Friday night. And Mangone, sorry to miss that outfit of yours at the Kentucky game. It was enough joy for me to see you turn into a puddle after taking that gummy on Monday night. So excited to be back and see you in a state of sobriety.
I was not in great shape, JT, but I will say when we were at the Kentucky game, DC, when DC drinks, he gets after and has a good time and he's hilarious. And randomly we're walking to our seats and DC goes, "Holy shit, JT's at the game." And he just points to some bald guy, which was absolutely hilarious. So it was a good time. We had a blast. And, I'm always happy though. Like at the end of the trip, I'm always happy to get back. Like DC, you and I talked about it a little bit. You were like, "I'm not getting a salad today. I'll get a salad on like Saturday." And now's not the time. We just eat terrible, drink a lot. And once you get back, it feels good.
I will say you made it to the gym today. You said I need like another day to sleep and recover and maybe back to kind of the normal grind starting tomorrow. But with that, let's get into these games. We do have 6 games to talk about. We'll go through them game by game like we always do, and we will of course follow the DraftKings order of games. They've got the first game listed at Charlotte at the Washington Wizards. 226 total in this one. The Wizards actually favored by 2 over Charlotte. Obviously, 2 pretty bad teams all around here. We do know LaMelo Ball going to remain out, and Washington will be without Marvin Bagley and Landry Shamet as well. Trey Mann, the only guy with the questionable tag as of now for Charlotte, but he has had a pretty important role for them since being traded over. So certainly significant news there. We could see potentially another good game out of Micic. We'll see if he gets the start again. With that, let's get into it. We'll start with you, JT, Charlotte and Washington. What do you got for us?
Yeah, this is, according to my first runs of the Opto, is going to be something that you want to get a piece of. You mentioned Micic, who's been very good. We were stubbornly under on him the other night, and he had a pretty good game. But I think it's a good matchup for him. I also think it's a good matchup for Miles Bridges here with the lack of center production from Charlotte. And then on the other side, we saw Corey Kispert have a down game the other night. I think it's a pretty good spot for him. And then when you look at Kyle Kuzma, this is a matchup that he should be able to get as many rebounds as possible there. So I think it's a spot where you want to have 2 or 3 of these guys in your lineups. I personally am not going to be going to 4-man stacks. I've been doing max 2 on many slates, and it's been working out well. I think I may sneak in a third player here, but it probably won't be from one of these teams. But I do think that this is a game that has a lot of opportunity for ceiling activity.
Yeah, we'll see what Washington does with the starting lineup. Obviously missing Bagley. I think we'll see Kuzma get some time at the 5. And then do we think it's Rashawn Holmes starting at center for the Wizards? Van Gogh, talk to me about their big man situation and obviously wherever else you're looking at in this game.
Yeah, before I dive into that, I do have one question, JT. Is our good friend Christopher Hansen, is he watching? There's a camera behind your head that the chat is asking about. So can you touch on that before I touch on the Wizards here?
Yeah, so I got back from the Rum Pure Sports party on Wednesday, right? Because you guys went to the Kentucky game Wednesday night, and it took me a day to get dry, so to speak. And then yesterday, out of nowhere, I live on a cul-de-sac, and all of a sudden there are work trucks lining both sides of the street, and they came to install Google Fiber. Okay, and so yesterday I drive an SUV. It was almost impossible to get down the street. I actually drove over one of the orange cones. It was very upsetting. And then today, right about lunchtime, these guys are drilling holes in the neighbor's yard across the street, and they cut a gas line. And so I come out to go get lunch. There are 3 fire trucks there. And I was like, hey, am I going to be able to get out of here? And they let me out. Then when I come back, my internet's not working. And so I'm like, what is going on? Are these fools that incompetent? And so I walk out and I approach the people who are digging the holes. I said, hey, did you guys cut the cable line too? And they go, oh yeah, we just did that. And I just was like, when do you think? Well, we already called Comcast. They'll be here soon. And I'm like, I'm like, do I go to a seedy motel and just rent a cheap room to do the show? Do I try and get a conference room at a little nicer hotel? And then thankfully, some very good friends of ours live a couple of cul-de-sacs away, and they were home and allowed me to come here and use the internet essentially to do this show. So that, number one, shows you what good friends I have, but also how dedicated I am to this craft, that I am in a foreign place for the people. And I said to my wife, I said, after spending the week with all these guys, by the way, hot tip to Wiley, Colton's dad with the steaks, Wiley with the rest of the food. I said, there's no excuse that I would ever think to use to not do this show on Friday night after the week I had. So here I am.
Yeah, you couldn't skip this show. So I do appreciate the dedication, you being here, and hopefully that.
And Jetty says call before you dig. Jetty says call before you dig. Here's the thing: there's spray paint and little flags all over the neighborhood. The other day, my wife was like, "It's disgusting. It looks like Auburn threw up in our front yard because it was all orange and blue, and she's a Georgia girl, so that was hurtful." But they did call. They did do the measuring. And they still cut the fucking lines. It's just incompetence, pure incompetence.
I feel like you're going to get home, and now the power is going to be out as well. And they're just going to slowly destroy all the infrastructure around.
Then I will be in a seedy motel because I'm max entering tonight. So I got to find a place to make the lineup somewhere.
No, 100%. Mango, do we get your take here on this game, Charlotte, Washington?
No, you have not gotten my take yet. So yeah, let me dive into that one. This is definitely a game we're going to have to like. I mean, it's hard to get past this game. It's going to be one that we are going to get exposure to. It's 2 teams. Like I always talk about teams that we want to target. Charlotte's one we want to target, and Washington. They are one that we want to target. So this is going to be a very DFS friendly game. You're going to want a lot of like options in this game. And there's some good price tags. But like I always say, and I think JT says this a lot too, is I know to see you're on the other side. You like to overweight some of these games. I still don't want to go too overweight. Like I think there are some good price tags, but I want to be a little cautious with it. Again, many ways it's going to cap, but that's just the way that I like to do it. Tyus Jones at 6'2". I think he's a really good play at this price. Now his floor can be low. That's the one thing to worry about, but I think he's definitely in the conversation. Jordan Poole, not a comfortable roster typically, but from the recent production and at 6K, I'm not going to ignore it. I think he's definitely in the conversation today as well. I prefer someone like Kyle Kuzma, though. I think Kyle Kuzma is a really good play. There is definitely a price difference between these other options. He can play some center minutes, and that's a good thing to call out with the Marvin Bagley injury. So that's going to be very, very beneficial to him. And I also think it's a good spot for Denny Avdia. Denny Avdia at 6'7" has a very nice ceiling. Again, though, kind of a rough floor, but I think all 4 of those guys are really strong plays that you have to consider on this slate. Now, when it comes to the other Washington options, it's a bit shaky. Like Corey Kispert and Bilal Coulibaly, they're going to get some run, but I think it's between that range of 18 or 28 minutes. You don't know what you're going to get. So ownership is going to be key on them. If they're going to be very high owned, I wouldn't be interested. If they were going to be low owned, I think they have to be in the pool and in the conversation and good contrarian pivot. So I think they're definitely in play, but it's really that key four of Poole, Tyus Jones, Denny, and Kyle Kuzma. If we get a surprise starter that we're not expecting, well, then we'll obviously react to that. We'll be in the Discord chat discussing that and breaking all that down. But Washington is a team that I just don't think you can ignore. Now, are they needed? Are they a team that you have to play, guys? No, I don't think you have to play them, but they're good plays that have really good ceilings in a good spot. Now, if we pivot to the Charlotte side of the ball, and I see the chat talking about Miles Bridges a little bit. It's definitely a good spot for Miles Bridges. But again, wide range of outcomes for him. The good news is he's in a good matchup where I'm not that worried about that. I think at 8.4K, he's definitely a quality spend on this slate that you should be considering. Now, I don't know what to do these other guys like Grant Williams. Sure, if the shots fall, he could do well, but I don't know. It depends what his ownership is going to be. Davis Bertans, what do we do with the chalky Davis Bertans at 4.2K? I mean, he's fine. He's not this just priority play. I also think at his 4.2K price tag, I don't think he's going to break a slate. So I think you can get away with a fade on him if you want to. If he was 3K, I think it'd be a little bit of a harder fade. But at 4.2, it's just a way different price tag than it was in the past. Brandon Miller at 7K, I think he's a solid play that has upside. But I'll be honest, I prefer Denny Avdia and those other Washington options to Brandon Miller if I had to pick one. If for some reason Brandon Miller was starting at the point guard spot like he was for that 2 to 3 week stretch, then my opinion would change. But I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting it to still be Micic. I'm assuming he'll be the guy at 5.3K that's going to get a lot of run. He's definitely a good play at 5.3. I'm sure JBC likes him. I know he liked him earlier in the week. I'm sure he's going to like him here in a spot against Washington. And Trey Mann is a good play if he plays. If Trey Mann doesn't play, that will be a boost to those ball handlers in Micic and Brandon Miller. So we'll have to really like them, and there'll be strong plays in single entry, 3-max, and MME format. So overall, I really do like Bridges, Micic, and Brandon Miller on the Charlotte side of the ball. I would like Trey Mann if he is in. All the other options I'm not comfortable with. And same with Washington. I like that core four they have, but all these other bench guys, I'm just not confident in them at the moment. I think there is the ability for them to be on winning like MME lineups. Like if Rashawn Holmes got the start, then I would be interested at 3.7, but I just can't say that with confidence. And I think some of these options that we have that are like the fringe bench guys that could play minutes at the end of the game or could start, I just don't think they're as much. They're not as good a plays as these other guys that are just secure starters. And the price tag's already too good with the ceilings they have that I want to get exposure. But I'm probably going to be very similar to JT on this one. I'm probably going to have a max of 2 on these guys just because I want to sprinkle them into my lineups, but I don't want to have too many of them just because I think it's a little concerning. Maybe I would move it to max of 3 if I was lacking value, but I think that's kind of how I'm handling this team right now. It's one of the best games in the slate, but I want to stick to the core starters. I don't want to get baited into some of these other plays. Like if you look at the Spurs yesterday, I was at the airport. I ran my lineups a little lazily. I got baited into some of these like Nets and Jalen Wilson and Dominic Barlow on FanDuel. And I just don't want to get baited into that with some of these teams. I don't think it's a good idea. And I think at this point in the season, you're going to see a lot of volatility with some of these bench guys.
Yeah, no question. We talk about it all the time in the NBA. Obviously, you don't want to overdo it, especially in my opinion on the first game, the first lock of the slate, and especially at this time of year in the NBA when there's often news that pops up somewhat unexpectedly. We've got obviously a bunch more games to talk about, some significant injury situations with the Wolves and the Hawks in particular. So I'm with you guys. I think. Yeah, two is fine on either of these teams. Maybe 3. I wouldn't go beyond that. Obviously, Charlotte situation, I think, is kind of largely dependent on the Trey Mann news. If he's out, kind of bumps across the board for the Charlotte starters. But that'll do it for Hornets and Wizards. We'll move to the other 7 p.m. Eastern time game. It is the Pelicans and the Philadelphia 76ers. New Orleans favored by 7.5 here, 222 total. Tyrese Maxey remains out for Philly. They will have Kyle Lowry in. He is good to go, it looks like. And then Nick Batum, the only other questionable player in this game. So it should have a pretty much healthy Pelican side, and at least compared to where they've been, a pretty healthy Philly side. Obviously missing Embiid, Maxey, plenty of room and production to go around for the 76ers. We'll go back to you to start, JT. What do you see between the Sixers and the Pelicans tonight?
Yeah, so I did a couple of runs in the Opto of 150 lineups, and the one thing that stood out to me is I didn't get a single player from this game. And I think that's probably right on the Philly side. The Pelicans have had either the best or the second best defensive rating since the All-Star break. They have really hit the stretch run here going towards the playoffs. So I can't see myself getting too excited about playing anybody from the 76ers. But I do think when you look at the Pelicans and you think about what is likely to happen here, right, which is Sixers are going to struggle to score. And the minutes that Trey Murphy has been playing and how efficient he has been, I know the price is up there a little bit, but I want to sprinkle a couple of a percentage, maybe 10% of Trey Murphy across my lineups. Whatever the field is, I want to go a little bit above just because I think he could get some extra minutes here. And then the rest of these guys, I mean, I'll be max one of the big three: Zion, Ingram, CJ, not really considering Valanciunas, although it is a good matchup here. Maybe Larry Nance pops a little bit as someone who could get a few extra minutes here if this game goes sideways for Philly. But overall, I think I have a lot less interest here as a whole, but certainly almost minimal interest on the Philadelphia side.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Philadelphia obviously struggling a little bit here. Not the best matchup in the world, certainly, and they do get a little bit healthier here, at least, along with the climbing prices, right? Because they have had guys out. So we've seen, Lowry, Payne, Tobias Harris, these guys' prices have been on the upswing and makes them, I think, not great plays tonight, Mangone. But what do you see between the Pelicans and the Sixers here?
Yep, I like the call by JT with the Trey Murphy thing. Like, a lot of people are going to play like Corey Kispert, some of these like Hawks options at forward. Trey Murphy's a really interesting pivot, and he's uncomfortable, right? No one wants to pay 5-6 for Trey Murphy. We know what his ceiling can be. If you just take out the player, the matchup, and you say, Trey Murphy, look at his last two games, 45, 50. I'm not trying to be game log watcher. I'm just stating that the ceiling is there. He is the type of player that at that price, it's just too low for what the ceiling is. So I like the Trey Murphy call. I think Zion is in a really good spot here. Another thing to call out with this slate, I think context is always important on slates. And this is not a slate where you have all these studs to spend on. If you just sort by utility on DraftKings, Embiid is out. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 10.5K against the Heat, not the best matchup. Jalen Brunson is questionable, and he's 9.5K. Your third highest priced guy on this slate is DeJounte Murray at 9.2. And then it's Ann Edwards at 9K. Like, there's only 4 players above 9K on this slate. So you are going to live more in this like 8K range than you think on this slate, which is going to allow you to play more of these balanced builds at times. So that's why you're going to like Zion. Zion, I just think, is going to pop some as a contrarian play. We know that things have changed for him. I mean, DC and I have been pretty firm about not playing Zion for a very long time. And then obviously the assist rate changed and the usage with him, right? That was something that we got on early. It's been good to us here at Run Pure. I'm interested in Zion at 8.1K. I think he's a really good option that you should consider. The rest of it, though, I'm not super excited about some of these options. Like, for instance, 7.7K Tobias Harris. Like, do I really want to take a shot on that, especially when he's got Herb Jones, I'm sure, on him? It just doesn't seem like a really good spot for a lot of these options. And these Sixers have gotten more expensive. It's just like, if Mo Bamba happens to start, like, one, I don't want to take a chance on that. And two, he's 4.9K now, right? It's just, this is not a good spot for these Sixers. I think it's one of those things when I go through and run everything, I'm going to definitely look, how many Sixers do I have? And if I have too much, I might make some adjustments to it. I'm okay with playing some of these Pelicans, but it's really Zion and Trey Murphy. And again, 6-game slate. I don't know if they'll get some exposure to these Sixers, but I'm okay with eliminating some of them. Kind of like what Big T says a lot of the time. Like, sometimes just let people pay the rake on some plays, and if they beat you, they beat you. And I'm happy to move on to the next day. And that's kind of how I feel about this Sixers team right now. The only Sixer I really would consider is I think you could make a case that if you think Tobias Harris is going to have to deal with Herbert Jones, and maybe they give up a little bit more 3 balls, it could be an interesting spot for someone like Buddy Hield. I could see him bouncing back and having a good game and having a nice ceiling, but I just see other plays in that range that I think are just better options.
Yeah, all three of us pretty low on the 76ers tonight. The Pelicans side does look pretty good. I'm with you, Trey Murphy, Zion, the two guys I'm looking at most closely as of right now. And yeah, I mean, Murphy, like, if not for blowouts, he could have done even some more damage. Missed his most of his last rotations in each of the last couple of games. So certainly a guy to keep a look on, an eye on for tonight. That's Trey Murphy the third. Let's get to the next game on the slate. There's two games here in the 7:30 Eastern time window. First one we'll talk about is Minnesota at the Cleveland Cavaliers. Two kind of banged up teams here. Cleveland favored by 2.5. Really low 206-point total. Obviously, the Wolves lost Karl-Anthony Towns for what they're saying in a month. He'll be reevaluated. Disappointing for my Wolves. Hopefully, he'll be back to help out in the playoffs, but he's out. And then Anthony Edwards also questionable with ankle soreness. I do think Edwards likely plays in this game, coming off a monster game against the Pacers last night. So we'll see on that, but it certainly brings more players into play for Minnesota, especially if Edwards were to miss. But Towns being out certainly opens up minutes and opportunity, as we saw Edwards take advantage of it in that last game. And in Cleveland, a very banged-up team. Will be without Donovan Mitchell, Max Strus, Evan Mobley, all out for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So they're obviously going to be very, very short-handed. But this is going to be a defensive-minded game, a slower game. Like I said, a really low 206-point total. So it is kind of a weird spot, JT, where, yes, there is minutes and opportunity to go around for both of these teams. Game environment, though, not looking to be the best on the slate. What do you see? What are your takes here on Minnesota and Cleveland, JT?
Yeah, that total sticks out like a sore thumb here. On any slate, it would, especially the way the NBA is playing right now, but particularly on this one. So not one where there's a ton here. I mean, you do have, I think, some opportunity with the Wolves being on a back-to-back and Monty Morris being ruled out. I think that you'll probably see some more minutes for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Price isn't the best, but I do think that guard is one of the positions that we've had, or teams have had some success in against the Cavs. So I think he's interesting. Gobert will probably play a ton of minutes. I just don't love it, but I think he's in play. And then the same thing on the other side with Jarrett Allen, with the absence of Evan Mobley. Big men against the Wolves have actually done okay, mostly because of the minute opportunity and the fact that they've got to be on the court with, now you don't have Towns, but you have Gobert, you have Naz Reid, you have Jaden McDaniels. So I do think there's some opportunity there. And then I think that's probably all I'm really focused on. If Kyle Anderson happens to, fall into some lineups, I'm going to leave him there just because he played so badly last night that he'll probably get a couple of extra minutes here on the back-to-back, and you could see him take advantage against the Cavaliers.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about Jarrett Allen. I don't love playing centers against Rudy Gobert and the Wolves, but they're going to get killed in the non-Jarrett Allen minutes. I think, obviously you're going to have Gobert and or Naz Reid likely on the court at all times. And without Mobley, I mean, they just don't have really anybody else that can play a reasonable center, the Cavs. So, yeah, I think Jarrett Allen, 7,900 is interesting. We've seen him generally do really, really well when Mobley has sat out. Mobley missed a long period of time, like a month or so ago, and Allen had by far his best stretch of the season during that time period. And now we've seen him, kind of continue. He's had two really strong games in a row. So, yeah, the minutes should be there for Allen. I think just a really interesting game over here overall, Mangone, given, the slower pace, the defensive-minded teams, but a lot of opportunity for the remaining kind of star players on both these teams. What are your thoughts on Cleveland and Minnesota, Mangone?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity here. This is definitely a good game to target. And a lot of good spends to target. Like, we'll start with obviously Anthony Edwards. First of all, you guys saw Anthony Edwards block yesterday, right? I mean, that was incredible. He's the man. I absolutely love him. So at 9K, it's really hard to argue with him. Now, he is questionable. If he somehow misses and he rolled his ankle, played in the game, listen, there's definitely a chance that he sits. But this is a guy that actually plays. Like he plays through injury, doesn't care. I assume he plays after that game yesterday. And listen, they need him, right? Karl-Anthony Towns is out for a while. They are fighting for that, that 1, 2, 3 seed. It's a battle between OKC and the Nuggets. I even saw, apparently, I don't know if this is true. Maybe I don't know if it was like a spoof account, but apparently the Nuggets, they're supposed to go to the White House and they're not going to go anymore because they want to be rested up for the Timberwolves game. Like, this is a battle for that seed. If that's true, clearly Ant's going to be full go for every single game if he can, right? It's just these games matter a ton. So I think Ant Edwards, great play, good spend. Don't sleep on Rudy Gobert as a center option. Another thing to note with this slate, there's a lot of really good center options to spend on, and it feels like a slate. If you're not spending down for Bruno Fernando or some of these other man values, I think you have to spend up at center today. There's just too many good options. Rudy Gobert is a good play. Kyle Kuzma, Jared Allen is an elite option. Jared Jackson Jr., we know what his ceiling is going to be. Bam Adebayo, he's a pretty solid option. I think there's a lot of people are allocating their money to centers, and if you don't allocate it there, you might get burned. So Rudy Gobert could be a really interesting option in this range that I would be considering. Jared Allen, I think, is one of the elite options in this range at 7.9K. DC mentioned it. When Evan Mobley's out, he's just been an absolute stud. On FanDuel, you can play him at power forward. I would want to be very overweight on Jared Allen today. I think Jared Allen is a better play than Darius Garland if I had to pick one. So I think he's the better option. I don't mind Darius Garland, but I think Allen's definitely the better play. I don't mind him again. He's fine, but I think there's other cheaper guards that I prefer a little bit more. So I won't be as overweight on someone like Darius Garland. And then with the Minnesota side of the ball, like I said, I talked about Gobert a little bit, but Naz Reid is this play that I think is getting overlooked by projections a lot in general. I thought it the other day. Wish I would have bumped him up a little bit more. But he is a sneaky guy that can win tournaments for you on DraftKings and on FanDuel. So I think Naz Reid is someone you want to consider kind of bumping up a little bit more. Mike Conley, I think the ceiling is still there at 5'6", but I'm still a little cautious with him compared to some of these other guards. These are just better options with other ceilings. Kyle Anderson, we know what his ceiling can be. He's 5.2K. I don't mind him. I know TJ Warren is someone that's not on DraftKings. I saw people talking about that in the chat, but there's other values you can mix in. You can mix in an Nickeil Alexander-Walker and a Jaden McDaniels, but these are not plays I'm super excited about. I wouldn't want to be crazy overweight on them because I think they have the ability to burn you and they're not going to be that owned. And then Cleveland, we should talk about Karis LeVert a little bit. I don't mind Karis LeVert. I think he's fine. And again, he's got the ability to break the slate at his price. He's one of those options that has that ceiling. But I think ownership is very important on him. So he is someone that I want to know what his ownership is going to be. I think if the game blows out, he can be severely killed minutes-wise. He's one of those guys that you have to worry about that. Typically doesn't start. So he's someone I'm going to be a little bit cautious with. Isaac Okoro at 4.7. I actually don't hate him. He put up double-digit shots in the last 3 games. And in that Atlanta game, it was pretty good. The Atlanta game, though, keep that in mind that Minnesota's definitely a lot different than Atlanta. Atlanta's just a team you can absolutely attack and destroy. Minnesota is a little more difficult. So Isaac Okoro's fine, but not a priority play. And yeah, I think I'd mix all those guys in. I think you can mix in a Sam Merrill. That's fine. A Georges Niang, if he starts at 4K, he was pretty good the other day. You could have interest in him. But overall, this is a good game. It's probably the second best game to the Charlotte and Washington game, unless you think Atlanta-Memphis is a little bit better. I think those are the 3 games of the slates that we're really discussing and breaking down the most. But stud-wise, Ant Edwards is number 1, and then Jared Allen is number 2 in this game. And that's how I kind of break that down and then mix in some values.
Love it. That's Minnesota and Cleveland. We got another game here in this window, 7:30 Eastern time window. It's Orlando and New York. Another very, very low total, sitting around 204 right now. It is expected to be close. Orlando favored by 1.5. Biggest piece of news that we're waiting on, of course, is the Jalen Brunson news. Currently listed questionable, has obviously missed a decent amount of games, hasn't played, since the 3rd. So we'll see if Brunson's in there. Obviously, if he's out, it does open up plenty of opportunity for the New York guys. Again, not necessarily a great spot against a slower paced Orlando team that plays some decent defense as well. But still, if Brunson is out, certainly guys, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, you got to take a look at them. Maybe a Miles McBride. And then Orlando should be mostly healthy in this one. I do see Wendell Carter. No, yeah, he's questionable. So if he's out, that would potentially open up a spot start for Goga. Mo Wagner maybe gets some more minutes. They do have Jonathan Isaac back, though, which complicates things a little bit. We'll go back to you for this one, JT. Orlando and the New York Knicks. What do you have for us here?
Yeah, you mentioned the total. You mentioned the health of Orlando. And on the Knicks side, even where we're used to seeing a short, tight rotation, we're still seeing a tighter rotation, except you're now seeing Hartenstein and Precious Achiuwa kind of splitting minutes there, getting 20 to 26 minutes, which at the price points is really not quite enough. I mean, Hartenstein at 5,500 on DraftKings is a little bit interesting. Like I would have him in a couple of lineups maybe, but it's hard to break this down without the Jalen Brunson news. If Brunson is in, I'd be interested in him just because he has to do so much to keep this team competitive. The game is in New York. You mentioned the spread is just 1.5. It's expected to be close. I will say this, if you wanted to play some of these guys, and I will have some of these guys in my lineups just because the guys with ceiling upside, right? A Banchero, a Jalen Brunson if he's in. Josh Hart has been doing everything. He's been getting a lot of non-traditional, the stock stats while Brunson has been injured. So even at 8K, I think he's got a ceiling here. All these guys are going to be 2 to 3% owned on this slate. And if you get one of them, just play 5%, 3% of these guys, one of them goes off, goes for 50. That could be the difference in one of these tournaments tonight. So definitely not a game that I love, but one that I am going to include in my player pool, the guys who have ceiling upside.
Yeah, I mean, if Brunson's out, even in the bad matchup, man, you kind of have to consider guys like McBride, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, just because of the minutes. I mean, McBride has played 46 and 47 minutes in back-to-back games. What Josh Hart has been 40-plus minutes in, 9 straight games, 8 straight games, something like that. Played 43 minutes last game, gets to play that point forward role. 8K Josh Hart seems crazy, but, I mean, it's justified given the minutes and the level that he's producing to. Obviously, maybe not obvious, but I think kind of all of those Knicks plays are priced up to the point where if Brunson is in, I'm not really interested in Hart, DiVincenzo, McBride. But if he's out, I think all those guys are reasonable. I'm not sure you necessarily want to play them together. But, man, it's just hard to ignore that level of minutes. And they're obviously playing pretty well, too. We know Tibbs has no qualms about just running these guys out there for essentially the entire game. Talk to us, Mangone, Orlando, and the New York Knicks.
Yeah, I mean, if Brunson's in, you're 1,000%. Like Brunson in, I am not really interested in these Knicks. I would want to stay away. I mean, I would even probably make it a max of 1 at that point. It just would be a very cautious scenario. If you wanted to fade them all, that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't tell you you're an idiot. I do think that this Knicks team, if he's out, they're definitely in the conversation. Now, I wouldn't even hate the max 1 idea. I think both can, 2 can get there, but they are getting priced up. The reason why I probably wouldn't max 1 it is because, Miles McBride is there, right? And Miles McBride at 5'9", she's going to play a million minutes. He is someone that I don't think projections will bump up enough, and I will bump him up. I will probably bump him up a couple points if if Jalen Brunson is out, just because the minutes he's playing is just insane. And all you got to do is look at whatever, projections you do or use. If you're not putting him for 45 or more minutes, I think you're doing something wrong. And he's just going to play every single minute. So I think he's in the conversation. And I agree, it's not a great matchup against Orlando. Suggs plays some pretty good defense, but I don't really care. When someone plays 48 minutes, how do you ignore him, especially at 5.9 at K and they're running the point guard? Now, when it comes to the Orlando options, obviously, Wendell Carter Jr. went through a shoot around. He's a game time decision. DC, we can debate this now with my boy Goga, the elite fantasy producer, as we joked about at dinner. But Goga would definitely be in the conversation, right? If Wendell Carter Jr. is out, at 3.9K, you have to have a conversation of what am I doing with Mo Wagner and Goga? Because at those prices, they're both in play and they both can break the slate. They have the potential to do so. So that's going to be something that we are watching for. It doesn't start till 7:30, so that might be something we don't get till after lock. But he did go through shoot around. I'm assuming he plays here in this spot. But yeah, overall, Orlando's not a team I'm dying to get to. I don't want to play Jalen Suggs at 5.5K. I'll only be interested in the big men if Wendell Carter Jr. is out. And if I get a sprinkle of Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero at 7.3 and 7 or an 8.7, they're not the worst plays, but I think Banchero 8.7 feels a little bit egregious compared to all these other guys in this high 7 and low 8K range. I can get way more behind Franz Wagner at 7.3K, but keep in mind the Knicks play at such a slow pace that this is not an ideal spot, and I can see this game getting kind of ugly. So I'm going to be cautious with the Orlando spends.
Yeah, makes total sense there. We do have our friend Tubby here in the chat. Got to say thanks again for those delicious steaks, which I think we ate them all. I think I had like 3 steaks in 3 days, and they were fantastic. So thanks again, Tubby.
I have a fun story with the steaks. So we didn't eat them all. We had some left, but Rubio Dimes was cleaning things up. And he said, "Oh, I'm throwing this out." And I said, "You're throwing out steaks right now." And he goes, "No, I'm not." And I said, "Yes, you are. Don't you dare throw that out. Those were delicious. They were tasty. And they're at Big T's right now. So Big T is probably going to have a couple steaks the next couple days."
Grayson is having school lunch steak for the next week. And Tubby, I have to tell you, the steaks were so good. I did almost choke when Mangone said that Goga Batase was an elite fantasy producer, but it had nothing to do with your steaks. It actually, Mangone, we didn't give you enough crap for that take because we moved on very quickly. It was close to lock, but
you went there for the big steak dinner. By the way, we managed to go out for steaks before the Kentucky game too. And the original one was Mangone said that Campaign is an elite fantasy producer, and then he follows it back up with Goga. We had a big discussion at dinner, and I think the general consensus is that Mangone is absolutely crazy for thinking Campaign and Goga are elite fantasy producers. It's just not the case, man.
As JBC said, last year you paid 7.8K for Campaign. I'm just saying.
Right. Just saying. That's a great point, DC. It was Campaign that almost made me choke. However, if Mangone had said Goga, I would have almost choked as well. But Tubby, thanks for coming by. Thanks for bringing those around. And by the way, if you're a member watching now, Tubby, put in the name of your shop because he is starting a delivery business, a service where you can order his steaks online. Tubby, put that in there. These are prime quality, delicious. You guys have to order from our buddy Tubby.
I think I'm going to order. I love the steaks. I'm a big fan of them, and they were quite tasty. Even though I know Bobby Hare was very upset we didn't have butter for him to cook the steaks. You know, we had some trouble with some of the other things, but it was hilarious.
Butter, Stats wanted kosher salt. I mean, look, it wasn't a restaurant quality kitchen. We didn't have the accoutrements, but it didn't matter because the meat was so fucking good.
Correct.
They were amazing, and I'm happy to hear that Big T continues we'll get to continue the run of eating steak every day for maybe an entire week at this point with the leftover steaks. Let's get to the last 2 games on this slate, Atlanta and Memphis. Another close spread here. Atlanta favored by 3, 215 total. Getting some news here. Looks like Mo Bamba going to start for Philly, so maybe we can go back, touch on that a little bit. But we'll get through the 6 games first and then maybe go revisit any news that drops between now and then. Atlanta, obviously, pretty shorthanded at this point. Of course, missing Trae Young, but he will also be joined on the sideline by, their second best, or outside of DeJounte Murray, the second best producer, Jalen Johnson, who's going to miss this game. Okongwu remains out. And we've seen this situation, not this exact situation, but similar ones, JT, where Atlanta, they just don't have a lot of depth that they're willing to play on the wing. So you start to remove, just 1 or 2 of these guys from the equation. And now it's a couple guys, obviously, in Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. And they're probably not going to play Knicks level minutes, but guys like Sadiq Bey, I think DeAndre Hunter is going to get into the mid to potentially upper 30s. Bogdanovich is going to be out there a while, and we've seen DeJounte Murray generally perform pretty well in this role, obviously without Trae Young. Again, not the highest total in the world, but it is not a great defense in Memphis. So certainly the Atlanta side of the ball is interesting. And then Memphis, of course, just so decimated by injury. That's going to remain the case, it looks like, for the rest of the year. They'll be without all of their normal guys. Luke Kennard is also out, Watanabe out, and then G.G. Jackson potentially going to miss this game as well. I've seen a bunch of chatter in the chat here about Jaren Jackson Jr. We've certainly seen centers against Atlanta absolutely crushed. So I think certainly Jackson could have potentially a big game here. Santi Aldama's playing big minutes, performing pretty well. Really, I think, interesting game on both sides. I don't generally love playing Memphis, but against Atlanta, yeah, I think you can go to these guys. I think potentially a very good fantasy game. We'll go back to you, JT. What do you got for us, Memphis and Atlanta?
Well, on the Atlanta side, you've got the clear leader, the guy who's going to have the ball in his hands the entire time, pretty much. DeJounte Murray now is priced down at 9,200. Going to be very tough for Memphis to throw anybody at him that can stop him. Saddiq Bey played very big minutes. He's just 5,700 here in what's been a decent matchup for forwards against Memphis. Bogdanovich is the guy on Atlanta that I just really am hesitant about at this price point. All he does is shoot. If the shots are not going in, it's going to be very tough for him to pay off 6,400. And I'm not saying I'm eliminating him, but I'm higher on DeJounte, on Saddiq Bey, and DeAndre Hunter. And then you look at the center situation. I'm not sure why. Maybe they're trying to preserve Capella just for a stretch run here once they get some guys healthy. But he's only playing 20 to 25 minutes, which is why you're seeing Bruno Fernando pop at right around min price on DraftKings. And look, if you get to him, fine. I just don't think he's one of these smash DFS plays, certainly. I mean, we saw Goga even the other night, 21 fantasy points at 3,200. Doesn't kill you, but it's not really what you're looking for unless you get a perfect lineup around it. And then on the Memphis side, a lot of people talking about Jake LaRavia. Like you said, DC, this Memphis team really outside of two guys, and that's Jaren Jackson Jr. and Vince Williams, very tough to peg because everyone else is subject to a hot hand, even as they're shorthanded. So I think for me, it's much more interest in Williams and Jackson Jr. Jackson Jr. had a great game against Philadelphia the other night. Another team that gives up a huge amount of fantasy points to forwards, power forwards, and centers. And he's in the same spot tonight, especially without Jalen Johnson. You're going to have very limited size here on the Hawks. So I think he is a very good play. I'm showing right now only 15% on Jaren Jackson Jr. in terms of ownership. I think it's probably wrong. I think he's a little higher, but I still want to be over the field on him.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think this is potentially just a monster spot for Jaren Jackson Jr. We are getting news rolling in. We did get surprise news. Jalen Suggs going to miss. Looks like Wendell Carter will be in for the Magic. Trey Mann out for Charlotte. I mentioned earlier Mo Bamba starting. So got some unexpected news dropping here. But like I said, we will go back to that and kind of revisit after we get through these last two games. Let's stick with you here, Mangone, Memphis and Atlanta. I know, you're not the game stacker that I like to do sometimes, but this one looks like one that you could potentially do it and get some big scores. So talk to us. What do you see here? The Grizzlies and the Hawks.
Yeah. One thing to call out with Jaren Jackson Jr., one elite matchup. So one thing I think about with him in these spots is it's a lot of if-then scenarios. If Memphis gets blown out, this could really hurt Jaren Jackson Jr. And the Hawks aren't a bad team, but they're not good at defense, where I think this game is going to be competitive enough. Memphis is at home. This is very much an elite Jaren Jackson Jr. spot. We know what his upside can be. We understand what the floor can be if it doesn't work out well, but I think you got to take chances on Jaren Jackson Jr. in tournaments. He is going to be higher owned, to be fair, so you can make arguments for pivoting off of that because of it, but I'm okay with the ownership based on the matchup. I think you got to also think about some of these other options on Memphis. I don't need Santi Aldama. I like him more when Jaren Jackson Jr. is out. Jordan Goodwin at 5'2", he's fine. Not my favorite play in the world, but he's fine. He could be a pivot off of a Micic, but I think Micic's a better play. Jake Larvia, he's looked a little bit better. He's been getting a little bit more run. Am I confident in that run? No, I'm not, but it is a good matchup. They struggle a lot with forwards, so I don't think it's a bad spot to go to him, especially if Gigi Jackson's out. He is questionable for this game. This is a piece of news we still do not have. This game is at 8 o'clock. We might not have this news where people might already lock into other plays where there could be some really good adjustments made onto some of these Memphis options. We also have Luke Kennard as doubtful. That's a big piece of news. Who could that benefit? It could certainly benefit a John Conchar. I could see him doing pretty well in this spot, or a good win like I talked about before. So there are some pieces of news that could fall that could make us interested in some of these plays. Starting lineups are going to be important. That's another reason to be in the Discord chat over at Run Pure Sports and go sign up and check it out, right? I mean, we are sitting in there answering your questions, helping you with last minute news. And there's other members in there talking about it too, breaking it all down. So that's something we'll definitely discuss there. But I think this is a situation, JT, you just can't go out with the wife tonight and just set and forget it. I think you got to at least wait around a little bit. You got to tell the wife, hang on a minute. It's not late swap tonight. We need a little bit more time before we go out to dinner. And once you get the news, you might be able to run out the door really quick. But I think this Memphis stuff really does matter and could be a huge impact on this slate. The Atlanta side of the ball, I do think it's an interesting spot for DeJounte Murray at his price of 9.2K. I think no one's going to play him because they're playing all these 8K guys. I think he's an interesting contrarian tournament option. Not a priority at all, and it won't take much to get overweight on him. I don't love Bogdanovich at 6.4K. I just don't think he's been that impressive at that price, and there's better plays in this range. I'd rather go to a Sadiq Bey for cheap, a Bruno Fernando maybe as a cheap center option at 4.4K, or a DeAndre Hunter. But in my opinion, especially with the value that's opened up, I really prefer spending up my center position. So I doubt I really get to that contrarian Bruno Fernando pivot. It just doesn't seem like that's the move for me. And I think there's enough contrarian centers in that like 7 or 8K range that I'm perfectly fine with taking shots on those guys and finding different ways to be unique. So definitely a good game to target with some of these mid-tier options on Atlanta and some of these Memphis options, especially Jaren Jackson Jr. as a spend, and some of these other mid-tier options or like value plays that could really open up and become elite plays based on how the news falls.
Absolutely, yeah. And it is looking like a slate where there's going to be plenty of value. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a pretty high scoring slate tonight from the winning teams. And I'm with you, man, going, you do got to spend somewhere, right? And there's just not that many high-priced options on this slate. One of them, though, of course, is in the next game, Miami and OKC. 224 total in this one, actually one of the highest of the day. OKC favored by 8.5. The Heat will be without Tyler Hero and Kevin Love, both going to be out for this game. Josh Richardson out for the season. So we do have a somewhat short-handed Heat team on our hands tonight. Looks like OKC, though, should be essentially fully healthy for this one. And so obviously that kind of does reduce, the value plays that you might look at from OKC. I think it's, for me, JT, kind of SGA or bust on the OKC side. I guess Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams are decent plays, but not my favorite personally on this slate. I do like Holmgren's price at 7,400. But yeah, talk to us, Miami and OKC. What do you see, JT?
Yeah, so Miami here on a back-to-back after a tough loss in Dallas last night. You mentioned the high total, and it's still, the Miami side, they're playing a much bigger rotation right now. You saw an absolutely massive game from Terry Rozier last night, so he's popping a little bit here. Don't know if he's going to play the same big minutes, though. So it's tough to get excited about anyone on the Miami side. Maybe a little bit of Bam Adebayo, although I really don't like playing these centers on road back-to-backs. But I think it's been a decent matchup. And then you mentioned it, right? It's SGA. It is Chet Holmgren, and then Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams with an absolutely massive game. That was against Portland the other night. One thing I will point out here, it looks like this Thunder rotation. Now, we've been fooled before with Mark Daniel here. and whether or not the rotation is stabilizing. But I will say the minutes are up for Josh Giddey. 28 and 32 minutes last couple of games. The price hasn't caught up. So I'm fine with sprinkling a little bit of Josh Giddey into my lineups here as a contrarian lower price play. And then I do have interest in SGA. We saw Luka Doncic have his regular outstanding game last night. Miami should be maybe just a little bit less fresh here on this road back-to-back. So I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at just 10 to 15% ownership is definitely something that I'm going to be interested in having in my lineups, as I see Travis talking about Bruno Fernando as an elite fantasy producer. The list of elite fantasy producers grows. It is now a three-headed monster of campaign, Goga Batadze, and Bruno Fernando.
I mean, JT, all I have to do is I can pull up StatMuse, and in Bruno Fernando's career, he averages 1.92 fantasy points per minute. That's pretty good.
All 600 minutes that he's played.
Mango. Yeah. I think you need to go read the definition of what elite means. I think that's the sticking point here. I think your definition of elite is contrived of way too many players. You know, I
think it's because I consider there's elite guys in the cheap range, right? There's elite guys in like certain ranges. I think that's
price dependent. It's price dependent.
Yes, it's price dependent. Like you're not playing Dean Wade at 3.5 and saying that his fantasy production is elite, because it's not. So
Dean Wade is the one guy that we that does not make the cut. He is not elite.
I agree for sure. You know who else doesn't, in my opinion? Sam Merrill. He doesn't make that cut either. So there's some of those cheap guys that just don't make the cut for that. But I'm a big Bruno Fernando guy when he gets minutes. If you told me he got 30 minutes a night, I'd be in every single night.
We'll give Travis a gummy and see how he feels about Dean Wade and the word elite. See if that changes things.
Travis, Miami and OKC. What do you got for us in this one?
Yeah, man, I could use a gummy talking about this game because it's definitely not a great one. I mean, obviously SGA is like, if you have the money, you're just gonna get him. Like, if you are playing like 20 max tonight or something, or that $4, like you're just gonna get SGA on teams naturally. But I'm not saying he's a priority. I don't think he's just this like slam and spend. I don't think Bam Adebayo is the worst play. I'm not impressed with Chet Holmgren's defense. I think Bam Adebayo could have his way with him if he wants. But the problem with this Miami team is they only play with one basketball. And because they only play with one basketball, well, you got Terry Rozier, you got Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. I don't hate the idea of creating a rule, a max of one of those guys, just because, I don't know. I just think it's too many, that their prices, it's too hard for them to all get there. So I would be a little bit cautious with them. I don't know if our guy Bogart thinks Jimmy Butler will be in the torture chamber tonight with Lou Dort out there. Listen, he did struggle with PJ Washington last night. I'm not dying to get to Jimmy Butler. I think there's other spends I would rather get to. So the way I rank him, I think Bam is number 1 on the Heat, Rozier's 2, Jimmy Butler 3 when it comes to these spend up options. And I don't love a lot of these other values. I think there's better values on this slate that I can get to. And from the OKC side of the ball, I'm just not in love with a lot of these plays. Like, I think Jalen Williams has a ceiling at 7-1, but I think there's just better plays we've discussed and I'd rather get to. Josh Giddey at 5-1. I actually don't mind him. I think 5-1 is a bit egregious for what his ceiling is. So I think he is in the conversation for me. But overall, this is a game I'm going to be very low on. I wouldn't be surprised if I set like a max of 1 on this, and I wouldn't hate that. I don't think it's the craziest idea. I don't know if I'll do it, but it's something that when I go in the opto, I'll look at. I'll see how many of these guys do I have for sure. And DC, one last thing, William is needling me for Braxton Berrios from very long ago, and that was bullshit. He got hurt. It was absolute crap, but that's okay. Maybe next year I'll have another Braxton Berrios opportunity to tout him up.
I hope you do, because that's one less person I'll have to compete with on that particular NFL slate. So that'd be great to get another Braxton Berrios slate going for us.
Not so fast. It's another exciting season for our guy Sky Moore. It's another exciting season for Sky Moore, DC.
Yeah, we all make mistakes. Sky Moore is certainly one of mine on occasion. All right, let's go revisit some of these news because it is, I certainly think, significant. Let's start with the news of Mo Bamba starting for Philadelphia. I think this one could go like all sorts of directions, JT, right? You could see him just losing the minutes. It sounds like you're not in on the Mo Bamba train.
No, I don't know why I'm sure there's a reason why Nick Nurse chooses to throw him out there for 18 minutes and have him start the game. But I mean, I don't even think I can't get excited about him. I can't get to Paul Reed. It's still a pass for me on the Philly side.
Yeah. Any interest in Bamba, or does that change anything for you on the Philly side, Mangone?
Which one you said?
Mo Bamba starting for the 76ers.
Oh, no. I did talk about that a little bit earlier. Like, even at 4-9, like, they can just do so much stupid stuff. Like, I mean, could I see him get there? Yeah, like, I could. I just don't think it's, like, worth prioritizing at all. Like, if I got a small amount, like, I wouldn't pull it out of my teams, but I am not putting that on my single entry 3-max stuff. And to be fair, there's just not a lot of like cheap centers that you can get to. And if I'm going to play a cheap center, it's going to be elite fantasy point per minute Bruno Fernando. That's who it's going to be.
There we go. Bruno over Mo Bamba for Mangone. The other news, so we'll go over the Magic last.
Actually, DC, real quick, this is a good point. If Mo Bamba, and I haven't looked at him on FanDuel, if he is 4-1 over there, it's definitely a little bit of a different conversation for sure. So I do want to say for the FanDuel guys out there, and I'm playing FanDuel tonight, I will probably have more Mo Bamba. And I saw him popping up the other day a little bit more, but still be cautious just because I think they can mess around with those minutes a little too much. So don't just shove all in on 4.1K Mo Bamba.
They still, but I mean, nothing's changed. He started the other night, and Paul Reed still played the majority of the minutes. So I just the price is up for, as far as I'm concerned, the exact same minute allotment in a tougher matchup. I'm not interested.
But that's why I'm saying on FanDuel at 4.1K, if you just look at projections and you do not make any adjustments, you will get a lot of him. And if you think he's going to play the minutes, sure. But what I'm trying to say is, if you are worried that this same thing is going to happen, that he's going to lose minutes, you're going to have to adjust his projection or set a max. I think that's very important to mention at that 4.1K. On 4.9 on DK, I don't think you get as much because of the point you just said, JT. He's just kind of expensive, but I just think on FanDuel, you're going to have to definitely consider that.
You should. Whatever you have to do, take him out of your pool, whatever. I mean, that would be my recommendation.
So we do have Trey Mann out for Charlotte. He was previously questionable. I think this is pretty significant news because this is a team that's getting shorthanded at this point. I think the most direct beneficiary from that news is Micic, who's going to get, I assume, the starter point guard and probably, frankly, about as much run as he can handle. Has done pretty well when been given minutes. Maybe not elite, but pretty well. But then Brandon Miller and Bridges, along with Davis Bertans, I think is interesting at 4,200 too. This team is just getting pretty thin at this point, where I do think the guys who, do most of the damage fantasy-wise get some nice bumps here. Thoughts on Charlotte now that we know that Trey Mann is out, JT?
Yeah, I think it's going to get you more interested. I was already interested in Micic. I want more of him now. You mentioned Brandon Miller. Bertans is just a straight shooter. It doesn't, I guess he gets some rebounds and the 3-point bonuses here and there on DraftKings, but it doesn't make me want to change my exposure to him all that much. I'll still have some, but, especially at, a popular number, maybe under the field on him. It depends on what the lineups look like. Someone was in chat talking about Miles Bridges saying he'd been bad lately. That's fine. And that's a fair point. But this matchup against Washington has been so elite. We saw basically every team they play, it's a point guard, at least one of the forwards, and sometimes three guys getting to their at least median plus ceilings here. And I think you'll see that here with the Hornets tonight. So I do like Bridges. I'm not going to play all these guys together. I'm still probably, we'll have to see what the Optos put out. I'm still probably going to be a max 2 just because I'm playing the $4. And you have to get real close to the optimal to win that. So I think a max 2 here maybe 3 still makes sense, but definitely more interest now above the interest that I already had on the Charlotte side.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. And going, any additional thoughts on the Charlotte side of the ball with Trey Mann now rolled out?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the starting lineup, correct? That did not come out, DC?
Yeah, no starting lineup that I've seen. No.
Yeah, so like I'm assuming it's Michik, Miller, Bridges, Grant Williams, and then Richards. Maybe they don't pull Grant, and maybe they go. I mean, obviously, if a Bertans started, that would be interesting.
Grant, so by the way, Grant. Well, I mean, the price is up on Grant Williams. If this game is close, Grant Williams is going to play 38 minutes and take 15 or 16 shots.
Yeah,
so,
I mean that.
Go ahead.
That changes things for Grant Williams. I think like one of like the most guys that it could really just secure up a little bit more. Because I was trying to think through who could it, right? And like, could McGowan start and then do nothing? Yeah, I think that could happen. He could just easily not play many minutes and just be a spot start. But yeah, I think you can't ignore this news, and I think it really secures Michik up a ton, and some of those other studs. And then I know Jalen Brunson is on track to play. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that, but we kind of did comment on it. We just said, listen, if Brunson's in, we want to be low on the Knicks. Like, I might only play max of one of these guys. Just doesn't seem like it makes sense. And I doubt I'll get a lot of them, but I just think the Knicks are not great plays on this slate.
No, yeah, I'm with you. I do think Charlotte, Michich, Bridges, Miller, and Bertans, and Grant Williams. Frankly, I think they've got 5 guys who are pretty decent plays, especially given the matchup against Washington, right? Like Bertans, a pure shooter. That's not a bad thing to be against a team who doesn't play any defense. He should be able to get off those shots. You know, he's shooting 10 threes a game. I wouldn't really expect that to change given the news and the matchup. So I do think Bertans, pretty interesting value play on the Charlotte Hornets there. All right, last news to talk about. Yeah, looks like Brunson's going to play, which obviously really reduces the interest in the Knicks to me outside of maybe Brunson himself. But the Magic did have some surprising news. Jalen Suggs going to miss this game for the Orlando Magic. This is a nice bump for Jalen Brunson, assuming he's in there defensively. Suggs is very, very strong. And then I do think you got to at least consider JT player Markelle Fultz. I know he's been up and down, but 3,600, he's probably going to get, low 20s in minutes. I do think he's a pretty decent punt. We'll see guys like Cole Anthony, Franz Wagner should benefit some. So certainly does increase the interest on the Orlando side of the ball from where I'm sitting. What do you see with Orlando now that we have the news that Suggs is going to miss this game?
Yeah, for me, still minimal interest just because they do have so many bodies. You know, they've got, like you mentioned, Cole Anthony, Anthony Black there. Is Gary Harris healthy? Is Gary Harris or is
I believe he's healthy. Yep, he's good to go.
So I think the only reason to consider Fultz here, 2 reasons, right? A bounce back opportunity, and then the price point of 3,600. You know, you probably don't need the salary on this slate, but could he get you 25 or 28? He absolutely could. So I think there's reason to consider that there. And then I said these guys with ceilings, Franz, Banchero. I mean, even at that price point in Madison Square Garden, I think these guys are going to get up to play. So I think you would still max. I like Travis's idea of maybe maxing just one of these guys and seeing what happens.
Makes sense to me. That's all 6 games. Went over all the news. So let's get to our plays of the day. We'll start with you, Travis, for the elite fantasy producer play of the day.
Yeah, the elite fantasy producer play of the day. Let's go with I don't know if he has a lot of ownership today, but I don't care. We're just going to give out an elite fantasy producer. It's Denny Avdia. Denny Avdia in a pretty good spot for me. Playing against Charlotte, I love him when he gets these like small ball, no defense up and down the court lineups where we're not playing with centers. That's where Denny Avdia gets the rebound rate up. That's where he is ball handling more in transition. So Denny Avdia will be the sweet Travis elite fantasy producer play of the day.
All right, we got Denny Avdia. Let's go over to you, JT, for the destroyed house construction worker play of the day.
I like that. Relocated due to unforeseen events.
Yes.
I'm gonna stay in that Charlotte Washington game because I think the plays on the Memphis Atlanta game are a little bit too obvious, and I'm gonna go with. Thank you, Javontown. I'm gonna go with a guy who I expect to bounce back here. He is in a great matchup. It's a matchup that almost every player at his position has crushed. That's Miles Bridges.
All right, Miles Bridges. I'm going to stick with the Charlotte Hornets as well. Go to an old pal who's getting some more opportunity now, Brandon Miller, in a great spot against this Wizards backcourt. Going to be guarded by, I don't know, the likes of, Jordan Poole. I think he'll get that matchup at times. So you got to love that spot. Charlotte looking pretty damn good to me tonight with this matchup against the Wizards, and given how short-handed they are. That'll do it for our show. We do have, of course, the Up to Lock show coming up for members. Looks like that'll be Holden, JBC, Big T, breaking down all the news that's still yet to come, giving you the plays. And if you do want to join RPS and you're not yet a member, promo code RPS15 will get you 15% off your first weekly or monthly payment. That will do it for us. Get into the Up to Lock show, get in the Discord for the members. We appreciate all you guys watching. For Mangone, for JT, I'm DC, and we're out of here.